list yet of like what I think the best ones of the year are. I mean, right now, like, and maybe this is recency bias, but these last two talking about physics and the infinity and parallel universes and all that is freaking wild. Um, Probably the most mind blowing.
Yeah.
What are you reading right now on that?
That is The Beginning of Infinity by David Deutsch. It's his second book. The first one was The Fabric of Reality. Do not read. Don't read the second one before reading the first one.
Did you make a mistake?
Like, don't. No, I just couldn't imagine. They're already both mind blowing. Don't start at the beginning.
Don't hurt yourself.
Don't go out of order.
Yeah, as I've been joking around, like I if I forget, I feel like at times I'm time traveling, and if I'm found with my head exploded, I didn't Clinton myself. I just forgot to carry a one.
You're the blue
wild.
screen of death just locked up inside your own brain. Somebody hit Control Alt Delete on Jordan.
Oh man.
Force close.
Pull up my list of books to see what stands out. All the fourth turning ones, and not just that one, but there were several that I read in that genre. I definitely would say were.
You mean like as far as like the fourth turning topic?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just that topic in general was all good stuff, because there was the fourth turning. I would not recommend the fourth turning is here by Neil Howe. Neil Howe, I think William Strauss was doing all the heavy lifting on the fourth turning, and then he passed away, and then Neil Howe just wrote the second one on his own, and it's just douchey.
Yeah, I bet there was some kind of a balance there. A lot of times when you have dual authors like that, there's a balance, or yeah, there's another guy to say, you know what, that part is really douchey, man. We're not going to do that. So fix yourself. But I actually haven't read the second one. Something that came out a while back that I would recommend is a book called The Holographic Universe. I don't remember the name of the author, but that book, I read it way back. I think it was in the 90s when I read it. And yes, the 1990s. And man, it really kind of twists your brain. Essentially, the universe is a projection, and we're kind of observing it, and it goes along a little bit with what we were talking about earlier with infinite onions, and and that reality is in some ways an imagination of someone else that we're contained within. Wow,
we get heavy over here when we're not on camera.
Yeah,
believe it or not.
But yeah. How many have you gone through this year, Jordan?
You're on mute, bud.
You're either on mute or
I was traveling in another universe. Sorry, guys.
Welcome back.
I'm back. So if I finish the two that I'm on now, the Bushido of Bitcoin and the Beginning of Infinity, it'll be 55. So my goal is to knock both of those out before the end of the year.
Nice.
55 bucks in a year, man.
Man.
That's incredible.
And again, I'm a little autistically retarded. I was like, oh man, I got to get 55 books because then I'll average one a week. And then I was like, like days later, I was like, I think I've already passed that. I'm pretty sure it's like 52 weeks in a year. So I'm good.
This year it's 53. No.
Well, maybe in another universe it's 55.
Would be technically 56 if every month had the same amount of days. We have 13 months.
13 months at 28 days apiece. Why did that not happen?
Because we're stupid.
Caesar. Silly Caesar.
Doesn't make much sense, man. You know that there's a shift in there somewhere also, because when you look at the names of the months, October, November, starting with Sept, it's like 7, it's literally 7, 8, 9, 10, with December being the 10th month. So it's kind of interesting. I wonder which ones they threw in the middle. Is probably like July and August, named after Julius and Augustus, the Caesars. And so I wonder, why things got shifted the way that they did, and who decided that? I mean, was that
probably because of the harvest?
Yeah, I don't know, but it's interesting to me. I mean, because literally the names of the month are 7, 8, 9, and 10, But so that would lead me to believe at some point we probably only had 10 months, but now we've got 12. And why are they different numbers? Why are they different lengths of each month? I just don't get it, man.
Yeah, when you could split it all evenly, 28, and then you just add in that one extra day at the end of every year to celebrate, and you like, hey, international holiday, take this one off for the creation of, the good Lord. And you're like, why? What are we doing?
We probably played politics at some point like hundreds of years ago because somebody had the great idea of injecting complexity into a system that already worked well. That's probably what it was.
We need to name these months after the great rulers of Rome that let everything burn.
I'm looking forward to daylight savings being done with, though.
We could start switching up the months now. If we're naming them after like failed emperors, we could have like Bidenary,
Bidenary,
Trump Ember. What else we got?
Just a whole month.
Bush lie.
Just
Bush
the
lie is
Obama
obviously
month.
Freedom Month.
That's it, man.
Obama.
Hey, that's good.
Hey, if you're joining us early, we thought we'd just go ahead and hit the go live button. We brought Jordan and Gabe out of retirement tonight for the Jack Donovan episode, apparently, and we're going to be getting into a lot of stuff. Jack Donovan is the author of The Way of Men. Jordan, tell us what else he's the author of back there, because he's read all the books.
You got his whole library.
Becoming a Barbarian, and A More Complete Beast. He's written a couple others too, but these are the three in the series that I feel like we've been discussing these in Bitcoin Veterans from day one, just about. And I mean, the gist of them is basically like building your tribe. We talk about being prepared for all these contingencies, but you can't do that solo. And you can't even just do it like within your family. Like you might have a bunch of kids, you might have a fire team or two, like Shane, and that's not really, you're not going to really be able to survive long term like that. You're going to need a network within your community, and so he really kind of dives into building your gang, as he would kind of refers to it every now and then. It's good stuff. Probably shouldn't get into too much of that before he gets here.
Yeah, these are just teasers. That's all that is.
Just a little teaser. Just a tip.
Just the tip.
Tips.
That's how you wind up with kids.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's a dangerous game to play.
That's right. You guys have any books that have, just kind of blowing your doors off? Good. I mean, and it doesn't have to be, the study route. It can be something that was just for fun reading.
I've got one.
What you got, Mike?
One of the hardest topics the funny thing is like reading on philosophy and listening to classical music are both topics that sound very broad, but I'm extremely particular about. Like, for example, with classical music, there's only certain kinds of piano and certain kinds of violin and cello that I want to listen to. Everything else sounds like complete and utter trash and makes my ears bleed. Same thing with philosophy. One of the books that has been a favorite of mine that I've been going back to was I got the Audible, because if you tried reading philosophy, I love listening to it, but if I tried reading philosophy, I'm going to fall asleep within like the first 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's something for me, because particularly sleeping is difficult for me to come by. But so the book is by Arthur Schopenhauer, and it's The Wisdom of Life, Counsels, and Maxims.
Wow.
That's one that was particularly like there. I remember one of the chapters he's talking about kind of like the wisdom of people that think against the grain, and how much the populace and the mob just will not accept anything that they have to say because it goes against the kind of zeitgeist or way of thinking that the average individual has picked up. And I think we've seen a lot of evidence of that over the last 4 years in particular. And I think one of the hardest, because it happens within the Bitcoin community, and it happens with everybody else, and it'll continue to happen into perpetuity, into infinity, like you guys were talking about earlier. is that like even with new ways of thought, we'll get stuck into kind of like circular ways of thinking and echo chambers, because even if we're on the fringe and we are confident that we're right, we end up producing an echo chamber on the fringe that becomes the mainstream, and then we become the echo chamber that holds back the next fringe. And it's just like the whole cycle of like, you either you live long enough, you either die the hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. It was basically that kind of train of thought for that chapter, but like the whole book's been pretty good.
I've been reading I read a book about the Medici family, and I've wanted to go down that rabbit hole a little more, because they kind of existed during the Renaissance, and they had a lot of control of finances, and were tapped in with like selecting popes or getting in with popes, and like funding the Vatican, and just like their nexus of politics and religion, and appearing as being very benevolent, which arguably they were, but kind of being benevolent and a little low key about their wealth, so as not to piss off the populace, and like they weren't trying to like flaunt it necessarily, but they definitely like controlled so much. And it just really made me think of Bitcoiners moving into the future. Like Machiavelli was around that time period. They were very much like influenced by those ideas of being Machiavellian. They probably wouldn't have used that term back then. It was just strategy. But like that is what kind of Bitcoiners are moving into, like supporting the new Renaissance, supporting people like Michelangelo and Donatello and Leonardo, like some of these, not Ninja Turtles, like the actual artists, and like actually like pushing the arts and sciences for their time, but then having all this wealth and kind of controlling politics and religion to a degree. It made me realize, like, Bitcoin fixes a lot, but then Bitcoiners then will become the powerful entities, and we're still going to have that human element where we're corruptible. And as much as it fixes things, at the end of the day, we're all still human, so it's not going to fix everything. I do think it can make people a lot better, and it realigns a lot of incentives. I think kind of everything throughout history has made humans better, but we're never gonna be perfect.
Yeah,
we're always going to find a way to use the new rules to get ahead or screw other people over.
Well, definitely. Yeah. And when you find that people move into power, especially people that, either perceived or real have historically been among the oppressed class, if you will, or even just, anything other than the elite class. And then when they find themselves in those positions of power and in massive influence, it's interesting to see how they have the potential to transform. And the Medici family, they were the Renaissance really would not have happened without them, because they were funding all of these major projects that were happening. And like you said, they were heavily influential in the operations in the background of the church back in the day too. I mean, popes weren't getting chosen. There was, God had his say, and then the Medicis gave the final thumbs up or the thumbs down. And it's fascinating to see how that goes. And that's something that I've been considering as well. And we talked about it with Svetsky too. Is what happens. Let's go ahead and come to that conclusion that Bitcoin is won, and that we're moving towards that reality really being experienced. And then, okay, so what happens then? And it's like you've spoken about, Mike, with the second Renaissance. What does it look like? Do we move into a higher state of existence, and more contributions and more art and more creativity, and bring more beauty into the world? Or will we slide into the same thing that humans have the tendency to do? I tend to think that we have a lot of amazing times in front of us, times of because we've never had an opportunity for for humanity to really dive into innovation and creation the way that we have now in front of us. And I think that the potential for something magnificent is huge. I mean, obviously it won't go without its resistance, but I do believe that we're on the verge of something, and it may not really, come to total fruition during our lifetimes, but I think that we're going to see a trend more to that. Sorry, Matthew, but yeah, it's just, you should have waited 5 minutes, but, but yeah, I think that we're on the verge of that. Hey, here we go.
Welcome, Jack.
Hey.
But one thing I wanted to add, Gabe, before everybody went awkwardly silent.
Actually, I just want to welcome Jack to the show real quick. I was on mute there, and I apologize. Welcome to the show. We pulled Gabe and Jordan out of retirement for this show. I told them you were coming on, and they were like, "Hey, I can definitely make this show." So we went ahead and we've been talking and setting up multi-sig wallets over here in the background, and I was like, "Dude, this is good content. We might as well give the guys, out there in the audience some extra Gabe and Jordan and talk about some books we've been reading anyway." But we kind of do this pre-show for the first 15 minutes, and then kind of warm up a little bit. We'll hit the intro, and then we'll get into the meat and the potatoes of the show from there.
Okay, cool. Okay,
this is just
still live up in the
bullshit.
corner, and I thought we were live now. So okay, good.
Yeah, we are live now.
Well,
okay.
Yeah,
but it's also the pre-show.
This is the first time we've done it like this, so
Okay, well,
Yeah,
all right. Well, I guess that is what it is. I hope my sound's okay.
Hey, I was going to say, leave it to Jack Donovan to come in here with probably the best set I've seen yet.
that's
Oh,
fire.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, that's like
Thanks.
There's nothing feminine about that setup. It's pretty cool.
Oh, cool. I actually hate these. I decided to do it again because I've just been using a lavalier mic, but it sounds terrible. But I like looking like I'm on TV and not talking into the BBC here. Like this. That's the podcast look. I just hate it, but it gets the best sound.
Yeah.
Well, except for Shane, we just hide it. We just hide it better.
Okay. All right. Cool. I don't know if mine will do that or not. Let's see.
Yeah, these mics. I think is that an SMB5 or SMB7?
It's a Rode.
Yeah. It's I was gonna say, like, the closer you can be on these things, and that's the thing that I've learned is the better it's gonna sound for everybody out there that's giving us their time, and that's one thing
Right.
I try for.
Yeah. I kind of have to because I have a lot of reflection in here because it's Arizona. I mean, the tile floors and everything like that. You can get reverb like crazy.
Yeah, fair enough on that too.
Good. Well, yeah.
I was going to say it's the bald head. That's probably what all the reflection.
Probably
is
that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
just amplification in there. Yeah, the room's filling up, man. We've got a house coming in here already, so that's great. Welcome everybody. This is the last show of the year. We're going to go ahead and make some announcements. We're going to be moving to Tuesday night at 9 p.m. starting on January 1st. So the first show of next year, and it'll be the next show after this. So set your calendars, change everything up, and we'll start having, I guess, a more regular Gabe and Jordan on the show in addition to myself and Mike. So that'll be good. We've got a ton of stuff to talk about tonight. And, Jack, like I said, this is kind of our warm-up period, and, throw anything in you want. Probably go ahead and make the announcement about North Carolina resilient recovery up there, should we?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So got the good fortune to travel back up to Western North Carolina this past week. And I met with our good buddy, Jim Artman up there. Jim, I got to sit down with him, get to know him even better, check in on what he's got going on since the first time I met him, when that was the first couple of weeks we were up there. He just, very humbly said, I was in the Army while we were up there the first time. And I was like, okay. And so as I sat down with him this time for lunch, and we started discussing what was going on in the area and what he has been able to do, he's not only a humble man, he's a very successful entrepreneur, and he's taken his own time and his own effort, and he knows this place better than anybody in terms of my understanding, and he's willing to help people without borders and lines and everything else. So it turns out he's actually a 75th Ranger Regiment ranger. So not just a tab, but an actual scrolled ranger, and he's a sniper instructor. With this, for the past 2 months and then some change now, I guess almost 3, coming up on the end of December, he has been running operations and expanding operations in the Marion area and out. And what that means is now, having moved out of probably about a 5,000 square foot, operation, he's moved into a 500,000 square foot operation. He's got an entire crew there. He has got people from all over the country, with callings from higher powers that have come in to manage this operation for him and to free him up to do other things. So I guess the long and the short of it is we did our diligence up there, and we made sure that, we weren't just going to take all the money that we raised, which was about $120,000 within just a couple of weeks. And we are donating the overwhelming majority of that to North Carolina Resilient Recovery now. And Jim is, one hell of a guy. I know he's going to use it well. He's going to continue to update us, and we're going to put out the call for more volunteers, because I talked to him yesterday while I was loading up some lumber, and he was like, man, I just found an entirely new area that's been untouched. They're still recovering and cutting out and digging things out. And I was just like, I don't even know what to say, man. But I will also tell you, we've put him in touch with some other Bitcoiners out there, and those guys are looking at pushing all of those, and I'll let them make their own announcements on that. But to be able to be the eyes on the ground because of you guys out there in this audience, and everything that you've done to help these people in Western North Carolina, and no better cause, in my opinion. They've been absolutely, left high and dry by their own government, and, to be able to fill that niche and to do it through the veteran and the Bitcoin community, absolutely amazing job, guys.
And Jack, just to kind of fill you in a little bit, like basically this tribe of Bitcoin veterans that we've created here over the last, I don't know, year and a half, I guess we've been going, when everything went down in North Carolina with Hurricane Helene, we basically started kind of put it out there to, hey, we want to go help them, go raise funds. And I mean, I think within a week we had over $100,000 worth, in Bitcoin, which that was, 2.5 months ago.
That was $60,000 Bitcoin, which now it goes even further for these guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So after we spent I don't know, maybe $40K, and the price was ripping, we still had the same amount that we started with, which is even more now. So, a few of us went out there and helped set up communication with Meshtastic and helped get people generators and go out into the middle of nowhere to find people that, were still kind of cut off from everything and find out what they needed. Say whatever you will about the reports and stuff. There were FEMA and Red Cross and stuff in population centers, but they weren't leaving those areas and going out and finding the people that needed help. So what we were able to do with the support of the Bitcoin community, and then specifically the Bitcoin veterans, like the individuals out there within the network, was pretty amazing. And I mean, I think you probably deserve some of the credit, because a lot of the tribe building that we have done has been based off of, your books and your lessons, and kind of building off of some of that. So thank you for that.
Cool. Well, it sounds like you're doing good work. So that's cool.
Yeah, I got to say, Jack, we've been talking about you since, I think, before we were Bitcoin veterans in July of 2023. I think a couple of us were reading a book, and somebody said, hey, you owe it to yourself to read this book. And that was about the time, it was like, let's throw this thing into high gear and get this, Bitcoin veterans thing going. So, creating that citadel and, those, groups that are going to, keep everybody accountable and then push to make better versions of themselves, man. And that's absolutely incredible.
That's great. It's hard to do in real life. It's hard to actually organize men and get them to do things. It's a hassle. So, I mean, congratulations on being able to do that. Because everybody who I talk to who does it, it's like, wow, it is hard to get guys to do things. So, but if you have a project, it helps. You know, if you have like a goal, it definitely helps. If you just want to get guys to get together in a group, it's like it's a tough one. So
I
yeah,
think
congratulations.
Go ahead, Mike.
I was gonna say, especially when you've got like the different groups of the different types of guys, right? Like when you get like a bunch of like betas or sigmas together, they're gonna have their own problems of trying to wrangle them and direct them towards a mission. But then you get a bunch of alphas together, and that's like its own set of problems and difficulties, because then you got to make sure they're not fighting each other or whatever. Like the book was awesome, dude. You made what I really liked, like when I say the book, I mean particularly The Way of Men. Right. Like what I liked about that is it was acted kind of, the way it read to me was kind of like a megaphone for what a lot of guys have talked about as being like true, but then there's not a whole lot of like consensus or like public agreement of like, yeah, no, like this is what happens, this is what we do, this is how we think. And it's like it's nice to have like a book like yourself, like yours, like a physical piece, be like, read this, you'll understand men a little bit better, so that we stop running into situations like we've got going on in America currently.
Yeah, well, thank you. That is one of the things that was good about it. I think it's just bare bones, because a lot of people put their other features onto like masculinity plus this, and then it turns off certain groups of guys. But The Way of Men is just about theory, and it's all a logic problem, really. So it's like, how do men behave? What do they do? You know, it's very simple. Yeah, it's very simple and straightforward. But you know, I was a delivery truck driver when I wrote that, so I was just figuring stuff out. And then to have a whole bunch of special forces guys come back and be like, "Yep, that's correct." It was really cool.
That's dope.
Yeah, I actually we had a Spaces today on X, and we were talking about having you on, and I was describing the book. Somebody was like, well, okay, give us like the gist of what the book's about. And I was like, well, it's basically teaching guys how to be Green Berets and go out and create an insurgency within their community, peacefully, of course.
Of course.
Just like the Green Berets do. They try to do. For sure.
I thought that one of the coolest things about that book in particular was it was such a clear articulation of things that already feel like they're already underlying truths, and it was just a way to communicate that in a way that could be understood, because so much of it, the first time I read it and the second time, but was just like, oh, you know, the way that he put that makes perfect freaking sense. And it feels like something that, yeah, I've got that already. And there's like almost this inherent knowledge that's already wired in. But then to discover a way that it is worded like that and articulated, I found it to be extremely valuable.
Yeah, there's like kind of two kind of guys that end up reading the book. And one type is like, well, they almost read it like, well, it's obvious. Well, yes, of course. You know, and they go through it because it's the way they already kind of understand the world. And then there's other guys who just, it's brand new. So it goes one way or the other. So it's cool to see both those sides.
Awesome.
Well, go ahead. You were going to say something else, Jordan, before we get started?
I was just going to say, well, obviously it's for the latter kind of men that it's kind of mind blowing. Not to disparage them necessarily, but it's just, that is kind of the culture and society that we have now. And I mean, maybe unfortunately or fortunately, a book like that needed to be written to remind people that this is how it's supposed to be.
Yeah, well, they get the opposite messages from school, and you know, so many guys who, you know, they really don't have a dad around, and they've never had a lot of male friends, they haven't had brothers, they like all the things that would make these things obvious. They don't have all those things, so they're just receiving messages from the media and from their teachers, who are mostly women, and all these things, and so like they don't have any frame for it, and they're like, this, you know, it's cool this makes sense, but usually it makes them angry first.
That's what we need. We need angrier men. That's what Bitcoin Veterans is here for. We're going to start the show. Everybody hold on to your butts. God, it's good to be back. Welcome to Bitcoin Veterans. Man, I've got a full house tonight. Our guest tonight is Jack Donovan, author of The Way of Men. We got Gabe returning. Jordan's here. Mike Hobart, man. I am stoked out of my mind, especially after getting a good intro in. Man, what a good time. We've been at this for over an hour now. Just the four hosts here. And then Jack came in. First thing, it was just like, what? It's already live. Great. So, man, just to give everybody out there, if you're new to Bitcoin Veterans, which we have made a lot of friends in the past couple of weeks, I just want you guys to know you're welcome here, whether you're a veteran, whether you're a Bitcoiner, whatever you are. We're not here to discriminate in that fashion. We are here to spread the message of Bitcoin. And that is of hope, of freedom. It's of independence. It's the way of men, if you will. And this is one of those things that we put together. We saw that there was a need in the veteran community. A lot of people signed up to go and fight for their country, and then saw behind the curtain and what exactly they were fighting for. And man, if they weren't discouraged enough, 22 veterans a day taking their lives, we said, let's do something about this. Let's give guys a mission and a passion that I think we all fell in love with Bitcoin. It is that passion for freedom and changing other people's lives and making them freer, making them safer, giving them something else to live for. And I got to tell you, this group does not disappoint. So welcome to the show, Jack. Thank you guys for all being here. Almost 400 of you already. Go out there, share this, retweet it, do everything you can, and get some people. Go grab bourbon, grab a buddy, and bring them in here. But we're going to get into The Way of Men tonight. Jack Donovan, the author. Man, it's really cool to have you on the show after we've been talking about you for over a year and a half now, collectively. I think one of my good friends, his name is Andy, and I won't dox his last name, but he was like, man, you need to check out this guy and, let me know what you think. Cause you kind of come from this world where you got tribes and everybody's, trying to be better and, that kind of background. So I was like, yeah, let me see it. And I really fell in love with what I found, man. So we're privileged to have you here tonight. And I'm curious, I don't know if you've ever gotten into Bitcoin or any of these things, but, wonder, have you ever looked at it? Have you ever thought about it? Is it one of those things that kind of is elusive to you, or is it just one of those things where you're right at home with it?
Somewhere in between.
Okay.
I would say that I was thinking as we were coming on the show, because I really didn't know what we were going to talk about. So I was like, I hope they don't think I'm an expert on Bitcoin. I've dabbled. I would say I've dabbled. I have some crypto here and there. I when it went up to 70, I sold a bunch to pay taxes, which sounds like the worst thing in the context of this group, but I had to pay them. I would, it would have been cooler if I would have sold it at 105 or 108 or whatever it is today. But the government wanted their money. I have my company, the Order of Fire, my men's group. I set up an account for them too, so I was investing little bits. But obviously you guys are probably way deeper into that. I don't know that much about it, just enough to run some of the Kraken and whatever. But
it's all good. We're here for it, and the autistic retards that are out there in our audience are going to be nice about it. We're obviously a pretty understanding group, but the Way of Men is just a fantastic book, and takes a look at where we're at, and I just kind of wonder, where were you when you were like, man, I need to get this down. I need to get this out of my head and put this out on paper for people to kind of understand, what I'm thinking. Like, what was the impetus behind it?
Well, I would say I was one of those guys who grew up. I went to art school. I have this background where I got a lot of the feminist messages and all that kind of stuff. And then I worked for a living for 10 years. I've had 37 jobs. So I've done all kinds of things, delivery, worked in kitchens, done all that kind of stuff. And, real life changes maybe your opinions on things, and how things work. So I went back and looked at masculinity again as an adult. I was always interested in it as a subject, but I would say that I had the wrong opinions about it as a young man. And then in my early 30s, I went back and looked at it again. I started like, well, I've really missed something here. something good about man that is important, and I feel like it's dying in the world. And this would have been maybe like 2005, 2006, when I really started realizing this. I went back and I started reading like Jack London and things like that, which I hated when I was a kid. I thought they just stuff that you make you read. And then I went back, I'm like, this is really good. This says a lot about the world that I've missed, you know? So I just became kind of this evangelist for masculinity. But when I first started writing about it, someone said that I didn't describe it very well. Like I didn't define masculinity very well. And so then that was my project for The Way of Men. Well, how do you define it? And as I looked into it, well, no one else really did a very good job either. So that was my motivation, is to try and figure this out, this logic problem. Like, well, what is masculinity always and everywhere? Rather than, because I came from this kind of art school, like 90s background, I was aware of, like the trans thing and the all that feminist stuff that really I think a lot of people missed, especially if you guys like went and enlisted and you got away from that. But I was very aware of that for a really long time, like since the early 90s, and what they were doing and all this stuff that became woke and all that. And there was all this confusion about what gender was. And the feminist arguments about masculinity were that basically, well, they became the trans arguments about it, but was that masculinity really doesn't exist. It's not a coherent concept. And that's what they started building on. That's how you got to breaking down of all these genders and whatever. Like, well, it's not really real. So it becomes a very postmodern discussion. And so I was like, no, what they do, and this happens with all kinds of different versions of Marxism, is that they will, try and pick out the exception and redefine the rule based on the exception. And, humans are complicated. There's a lot of variation, but the general rules actually are pretty consistent with a lot of things. And so what I was trying to do with The Way of Men is ask a question. Well, okay, these men in all these different cultures dress differently, or they say different things, or they have a different religion. But what do they have in common? What is the same between all these different cultures? And, if you would have asked a man 3,000 years ago whether it's better to be strong or weak, what would he say? That's the same. Like, that hasn't changed, and whether or not they expected women to be strong, no one really ever cared. Yeah, cool. It's cool that you're strong, but nobody, that wasn't really where their value was. But for men, they were judged based on that. Same thing with courage. It's the same, that does every culture in the world want their men to be courageous? Yeah. That's, and so it was just finding those things that, is it always this or is it sometimes this? And that's why I say it's a logic problem. How can you figure that out? So that's really how I got to where I got to with The Way of Men and the tactical virtues and all that.
It's interesting that you said that, you in your study trying to solve this logic problem said that there wasn't really a good explanation or definition of masculinity, but then, the woke crowd back in the 90s was also kind of arguing like, well, no one's explained this and this isn't real and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, everything you just said kind of sounds like no one ever thought that there was a need to explain it because it was so transparently obvious that no one ever sat down and wrote about. So that'd be like, why do we breathe? Well, because we have to, or we die. And they use that argument like, well, no one's ever sat down and written a book about it, so obviously it's not true.
It seems like go ahead, Jack. Sorry, man.
Well, and that's the thing is that why I thought it was important to write a book about it was because all these other people were writing a lot of books about saying what masculinity isn't and it's wrong, and when it's wrong, it doesn't exist. There's tons of books were being written by feminist scholars and gender studies people who are basically all lesbians, and they're all,
that's who you want to write about masculinity.
Purple hair
must be an expert. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you had all these people writing all these books, but men, when you would ask them out of the blue, they didn't have a very good answer. They'll be like, well, yeah, you should, it gets into this confusing discussion really quickly that they can easily tear apart.
That's because we're
'Cause
men
men
and
didn't-
we're fucking Neanderthals, and we haven't thought about
Yeah.
what it's like to be a Neanderthal. We just are.
Well, you're fish swimming in water,
Yeah.
right? So like, what's fish trying to describe water? What do you mean? What are you talking about? And and it was a weird thing for men to even talk about masculinity. It was kind of a weird. You're kind of a weirdo if you're writing about it or talking about it in like say 2010. So it was a very an outside thing, and then it was really, I think, when a lot of the GWAT guys came back, you started to see an interest in that topic, like around like 2015, something like that. Then all of a sudden, you got your Jockos and all these other people were like talking about these subjects. But before that, it was like weird guys on the internet and like guys who were, the men's rights activists and pickup artists. Pickup artists are kind of like the precursor to like Andrew Tate. Like they, so I've been around for a long time and watching this whole kind of thing evolve, but it was really when I think a lot of the guys came back from the military, from being overseas, that they were starting careers and building businesses and becoming influencers and all this kind of stuff. And then it became like, hey, what is going on with men? Like what happened while we were gone?
That's a general theme, I think, and not just with like masculinity, but like freedom and the Constitution and like gun rights or whatever. It's like we all come back and we're like, what the hell have y'all been doing while we've been gone? And maybe this is the reason why you sent all of the manliest men over to another country to go fight, so that we weren't here keeping an eye on what the hell you were doing.
Not just another country, the other side of the planet.
Yeah. And you shove it into overdrive too, because like, let's think about it. I mean, during that time frame, you had the World War II vets aging out, right? Like their T has dropped tremendously. The baby boomers really, outside of there were some guys from Vietnam. I'm not going to lie. Like I had a Marine football coach growing up that just absolutely just stud of a human being, and I'm better for having that guy. But there was a lot of people that didn't have that guy. And so when the guys that were starting to come back from OIF 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and on, you start getting those guys back after being in all male combat units, at having, real experience. And they're going, hey, I don't know what you guys think you're doing around here, but this is all fucked up. Like this is a liberal institute, like college institution nightmare is what we've got going on. And I think that's where, you kind of have that fire and water moment where this thing is going to, it's going to blow up.
Yeah, and it seems like there was a shift that happened somewhere in there where there was almost like a resentment towards masculinity that occurred while the men were out doing the thing of protecting the country, or at least the illusion of that, and out there serving as the pointy end of the spear and doing the things out there. And then, like you said, Jordan, coming back and saying, what the hell is going on? And then it's like you said, Jack, where there are the exception that then tends to have the loudest voice. And so then they are the ones that begin to shape things. And then at the same time, there is the male aspect of the culture, the masculine aspect of the culture that may have even, for a period of time gotten kind of lazy and complacent. And also just with the understanding of, well, why should we need to explain this? It's just the way that it is. Meanwhile, there's an opposition that is speaking out against it. And so the need to articulate it, I think, becomes more and more important. And it's something that really stood out to me from your first book was the concept of the difference between being a good man and being good at being a man. That really stood out to me. And I stopped and I paused and I read it a few times and I put the book down. And I really pondered that one because I feel like it was a very impactful statement. Can you expand on that concept for us a little bit, please?
Yeah, I felt like you had to make that separation between masculinity and morality if you were going to talk honestly about what it is. Because men want to paper that over and be like, only, and it's totally what men do tribally, and it's in our nature to do this. And I watch it happen, and it is, I'm like, well, this is what men do. Our group of men are the only men who are moral, and it's part of the dehumanization process that goes towards combat. really. Like if you have to be ready to decide that these other people are evil, and then it's easier to kill them.
That's right.
And that's part of that whole process. And so what men do is it'd be like, men on our team are somehow better. And it's amazing to me that people do this with sports teams. Like they this is a corporation, and like, no, our team is clearly, those guys are assholes on the other side, and like they're just other guys that are paid. But it's so in our nature to do that. It is to conflate masculinity and morality. Like, they're evil and they're pussies. And probably none of those things are true. In the same way, like Russia has to be evil. They can't just be. They're just a bunch of guys picking up guns. Like who are doing their job, right? Most of them, they're not running the evil empire or whatever. They're just doing what they're supposed to. They're told to do. And but men want to do that. So you have to separate masculinity and morality for that reason, so that you can talk about it sensibly. Because there are a lot of really bad men who are objectively masculine. You always make the example of, well, dudes in prison. Dudes in pretty. A lot of them are probably have too much masculinity, and that's why they're there. They have like an uncontrolled masculinity, and that's why they will fight you. Like they will fight. They have all the aggressive characteristics of masculinity, but they might be just drug dealers or crappy people, or like they've done terrible things, but they are masculine. And then you also have like guys who are maybe good guys by whatever measure you believe that is, whether it's kind of a Ned Flanders guy, like your Oakley Dokley Doo kind of like kind of dorky, like guy. Well, probably not the most masculine guy, but there's some people where that would be a really good guy. And also, I was doing deliveries in Portland, Oregon. I mean, you have guys who are probably decent people, but not masculine at all. And actually a really good example that's, I think, will connect with a lot of people now on why those two things are separate is Scott Preston. I don't know if you guys are aware, he's the guy who got Trump elected in Pennsylvania. Basically, like he did a lot of work, and that dude will flip his hair. And like if you've ever heard him talk, I mean, he's a very soft-spoken man with long hair, and like not what you would expect, but he's a good man, but maybe not that great at being a man. So it's like you have to, really understand masculinity, you have to be able to separate those things logically, and then they aren't mutually exclusive though, and that's where a lot of people also go astray. You can also have good men who are good at being men. Ideally, that's what you're going to go for. But you have to separate them so that you can understand the things separately. Morality is one thing, and masculinity is this cluster of things that we developed to survive in rough situations.
I'm glad you use that term, ideally, because you talk about how there is this like ideal of masculinity that we are all kind of trying to achieve, but you're never gonna be the strongest, you're never gonna be the fastest. There's this ideal to achieve towards, but you're never, whether as soon as you start to get smart and mature enough, well, then you're getting older and maybe a little weaker and a little slower or something. But this idea of like having an ideal to strive for and trying to better yourself. Can you kind of talk about that and like how you came to that conclusion?
Well, yeah, I would say that was probably what got me interested in masculinity. And I should memorize it, but I haven't yet. There's a quote from Moby Dick where he talks about like man may be detestable creatures and do all kinds of terrible things, but man in the ideal, we should throw our costliest robes over it because it's something that needs to be preserved. And the idea that there is this better version of what we can be. And I think that that's how we envision a lot of our archetypes and a lot of our, like our ideals. Like, what is the best version? Like when I talk about my most recent book, Fire in the Dark, we talk about gods or fathers. Like, what is the father beyond the father? It's an ideal of this thing beyond yourself that you'll never be. mean, no one is ever the most masculine man. But what you have to do to really understand masculinity is you have to describe that thing. That's why I always say that, like, the most red. Now there's all kinds of orange reds and all kinds of things but what is the most red? The purest form of the thing. And that's how you get to explaining masculinity. But we need something to shoot for. And that's why I think it bugs us so much as men when we see things like statues being taken down. And we want to be surrounded by men who impress us. Men who can be like, well, I want to be like that guy or more like that guy. You're never going to be that guy, but that gives you something to shoot for.
We're attracted to the competition of the ideal, right?
Yeah, the competition of it. I mean, they always say, like, whatever, kill your hero or whatever by becoming better than him. But even if you don't become, this is TRTI.
I love
it. But even if that is unreachable, the idea that there is I'm never going to be the best. I mean, I started doing martial arts in my early 40s. I was not going to the UFC. That's not going to happen. But that would be the ideal form that you're reaching for. That's the furthest, the best thing. And so you're trying to get closer to that, but you're never going to get there. But without that best thing, and that's the difference between, I've talked about it in terms of like a vertical and a horizontal society before. Like a vertical society is like, you want to look upwards constantly at this unreachable ideal and move towards that, knowing that people are imperfect and they're never going to become those things. But it's better to have the ideal and reach for it than to have no ideal. Whereas the modern, kind of horizontal way of looking things is that ideals make us feel bad because we'll never reach them. So we shouldn't have any. And everyone should just be the same.
There you get the feminized communist utopia.
Exactly. And that destroys men. It destroys everything good about men if you take away the ideal that we could be better.
Well, and it's also the reason they have to kill the father, right? Like, they have to kill the father figure because, in terms of getting better, this is generational, right? And I think a lot of us are I think that what they want us to teach us is, this is so focused on you that, what you should be doing as a man, especially in fatherhood, right, is making that next generation even better than your dad made you. It's giving, same thing as you're having them look up to those people. So yeah, I think this is spot on. And we've got a real short-term thinking problem where we should be thinking more generationally.
Yeah, well, and a lot of this came from, you talked about World War II veterans a little bit, and there's that greatest generation or whatever, that if you look at the earliest feminist writings about masculinity, not the earliest, but like the 1970s, that period where feminism was really rising, it's all about being angry at World War II dad. It's all about killing the father because he didn't hug me enough, or he was a little dude was stacking bodies in Germany or something, but he didn't hug you enough. It was this kind of spoiled brat teenager way of looking at the father, and so they had to find something wrong with that guy, and it's some way to tear him down, and that's really what they've been doing all this time. It's like, take a great man. Every great man has problems. Every great man has something bad about them. But men want to see great men. We would let him be a great man. It gives us hope. I mean, we talk about Trump that way. Obviously he's done dumb things and whatever, but made some things happen. Elon Musk, same thing, made some things happen. Let them be great men. And you can acknowledge that they have faults, but so much of our culture and it's a very feminized culture that you want to kind of gossip about all these guys. Let's find the one embarrassing thing about him, and focus on that. And so many Hollywood biographies, like all these biopics that they do, are focused on that as well. Let's find the one. Let's focus on this guy's personal life. Never mind that all the amazing things he did, but let's focus on his personal life, or some failing that he had. Oh, did you know that he was also a secret alcoholic? Well,
how he treated his
conquered this or did that, 21. But
Yeah, like
yeah.
look at how he treated his girlfriend when he was in college at 21, like versus like him
Right,
changing the course
right.
of history. There is like
yeah.
Jack, you brought it precisely back to a topic I wanted to actually touch
Mhm.
on. You guys were rolling earlier. I was not about to jump in the front of that train, but like there's one thing I also wanted to touch on with the whole. You brought us back to World War II and the utilization of exceptions from the rule of being justification to destroy the rule in general. The other interesting thing that I've also talked about with like all of these guys and like other family members and peers and everything is the interesting thing of like those men from the greatest generation from World War II coming back and how many of them came back broken, provided poor examples of like proper masculinity because they were trying to find coping mechanisms for all of the terrors that they experienced, using those examples of broken men to attack masculinity in general, destroy the descriptor of it, and be able to like bring us down to this homogenous soup so they can try and mold us into whatever they want, is particularly dastardly. It's really gross. And the funny thing too with like that whole feminist movement of trying to destroy masculinity is what they don't understand is that you destroy masculinity, you also destroy femininity at the same time. Which I like. Do we think that's part of their strategy, or were they actually trying to supplement, like supplant and like replace with a matriarchy? That's what I'm curious about.
There were people who were trying to do that for sure.
Yeah.
There were people writing about that in the 70s and so forth. But I think if you go back to even like Betty Friedan, which was kind of the first, one of the I think first or second wave of feminism, but basically she was like a Long Island housewife who wanted to work in the publishing industry. And like, why do I have to vacuum all day? I can do publishing just as well as my husband can, because objectively they probably could. And it was these kind of women in these spoiled kind of white collar jobs who wanted to change the world for themselves that made
we call them
somebody
Karens.
have to. Yeah, exactly. It was Karens. And they wanted, they were going to have this exciting, fulfilling life. But the other side of that is all these women who have to go to their crappy job at Walmart.
Yeah.
They, like who would rather be with their kids, but they have to work now.
Yeah.
And, like they set up a society that was good for them at that time, and they could have exciting, fulfilling career girl lives. But all of these other women have to go and do crappy jobs. What they didn't understand is that most jobs, they pay you to do them because they suck. Like that's what most jobs, that's what work is.
Yeah. Even,
and men
even with men.
Yeah.
Like everyone wants to act like, look at the Fortune 500 and how many of them are men. Yeah. Look at what a small percentage of men that is. Most of them are working these like hard, like physical jobs that people don't want to do. They don't want to do it, but it's the job that they can get. Like that
1/10,000th.
Congratulations. Is this what you want? You want to be a freaking tax slave?
Yeah. I have a buddy who became a tattoo artist. But for years he worked, I think, at the copper mine up in Utah. And, he kind of, we would laugh at these guys jumping in their ice baths and whatever, because they need to do something hard. He's like, I have had my pants frozen to my body while I was up on a ladder, hanging upside down, welding something. Like they don't know how bad it gets. So it's just kind of, we always kind of laugh about that because he can outdo me. I've had some, done some hard jobs, but nothing like that,
That also makes me curious, Jack. Like how much of this do you think is like the trying to define and the retrospective like view on what masculinity is versus femininity? Like how much of this is just like complacency afforded modernity? Like that's what it feels like. It feels like weakness and complacency afforded like all this comfort and this time to just sit around. It's like, well, what is a man? It's like, what? Motherfucker, why don't you go out and do something difficult and we'll find out what it is to be a man,
Right. And when that was the argument that society didn't need us to be men anymore, so that we should stop.
That
was
We're
basically
more
what we become more evolved. We don't need you to do this anymore. And my answer to that is my job to serve you. Is that my only existence is to serve whatever your society that you want right now is going to have, or like, is there also something to do with my own personal fulfillment? And men need to do certain things to become, like I said, better versions of themselves. That's why it's so cool that, of all the things that are bad in the world, I always like to bring up that, there's middle-aged men doing the jiu-jitsu right now. And that was not happening. That nothing like that was happening 30 years ago. Yeah. I mean, I'm
the
50.
other bald member of the
I just wrestled like 20-year-olds today. Well, most of the class was 30s, but I mean, that wasn't happening. Men used to just go play high school football, then sit around, drink beer, and go to their job for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
And now you have all these guys having this kind of activity. And one of the good things about that, and not just because of older men, but just men generally, is that they get to scratch that itch. That conflict, thing that men have to do. This idea that you're not, the idea that, once a week or, a few times a week, you have to decide whether or not you're going to give up and let someone basically kill you. or whether you're going to kill them or whatever. You have to do that mental math. I mean, it's not 1-to-1, it's not real combat, but it's a game. But, when you have like a 260-pound dude on top of you and, they're trying to break your arm, it's intense. It's good for men to have that experience. And I think we do this practice at our jiu-jitsu place that my professor really started, and it's really good. We go around and do a gratefulness round at the end, like people say what they're grateful for. And the number of those guys who are just so happy to be there because it takes them back to like baseline. They're stressed out about their jobs. They're stressed out about all this stuff. So what's going on with their family, whatever. And they go in there and they don't think about anything else except for that and fighting. And they leave and they're all happy. It's just, men need to do this thing, whatever kind of thing it is. It doesn't have to be that thing, but men need to do things like this in their lives for their own mental well-being.
Yep. So I'm going to use that as a shameless plug to talk about F3 real quick. If you've not heard about that, it's Fitness, Faith, and Fellowship. It's basically like just a workout group of men that show up completely free of charge. It's only open to men. They kind of take turns like rotating who's running the workouts. And it's very like, I showed up to the first one and it was like, oh, I felt like I was in the army again doing PT. It was set up the same thing. Come to find out, it was a Green Beret who like started it initially. And we sat down, we all talked with him, not even like on the show, just talked to him about like, hey, how did you do this? But the same thing, like, it's just kind of, you forget about all that and you're just out there like doing some hard, stupid stuff in the rain, like just early morning, nobody's up yet. You're just out there just being men, and it's just this camaraderie that you just kind of don't get anywhere else. And within that group, I've shared excerpts like audio clips from your book, and Gabe mentioned it earlier. We talked about it, the whole line of being a good man versus being good at being a man. That was the one quote that everybody, like, it jumped out to everybody the first time, and I imagine you probably get that a lot, that quote sticks with people. There's something about that, like when men get around each other, like you can't, we're all trying to be good, we're trying to be virtuous as much as we can, but we also understand just like being men, and when push comes to shove, like if it involves my family and I need to protect them, like I'm gonna do some maybe not so virtuous stuff to make sure that they're protected, because to me that is virtuous. And it's
right.
Just like your perspective on things.
Well, and if you want to deconstruct the word virtuous, it
Let's
means
do it.
man. Yeah, I mean, it comes from vir, which is Proto-Indo-European viros, I think, but which is the word for man. And so as it went up into Roman, into Latin, it became virtus. And virtus originally really only described like the martial virtues. Like, was he valorous in battle? Is virtus, like all the strength, courage, mastery, honor, all those basic things. That's what they were talking about in when they first started talking about virtue. And then it kind of, as the Greeks and then Christians like took used the word and kind of evolved it, it became to mean a lot more things. but originally, because I might write my next book about virtue, so I'm kind of playing with this. But the idea is it fundamentally means man and manliness at its core, which so it's I think that's always cool and important to remember.
Okay, this is something I thought about this like almost the second that I knew you were coming on the show is we need to get you in touch with Alexander Svetsky. He just wrote The Bushido of Bitcoin. This book just came out, and it's basically about both the Bushido of the samurai and also like chivalry in Europe, and talking about like the virtues of, you know, honor and all this, like basically of being a man. And I would love to connect you two, because I feel like there's some points where he could use some like maybe brush polishing, and you could probably use some of his insight on it. But yeah, like everything he breaks it down, and like it's cool that you just broke down like what virtue means, because he does that with all these Japanese words that basically come from the Bushido, the code of virtue that the samurai used. And we got to connect you two, because I feel like that would be a great combination right there.
We might have to have
Cool.
a new show where we have them both on the same panel and get into some of this in the spring, maybe around March or so.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. I really I'd like to dive into a little bit of some of the points that you make about exclusion and hierarchy, initiation and discipline. You know, especially in your own life. You know, you obviously as a fellow guy that likes to go out and grapple and all that fun stuff. One of the cool things I love about this subject, especially amongst, you know, good men and guys who are good at being men, is the initiation side, right? It's kind of the sniffing out, you know, which is kind of interplays with the exclusion side of this a little bit too, where you once you start to figure out, you know, who guys are, you pass the sniff test and all that kind of stuff. In jiu-jitsu, you start to find a deeper level of camaraderie in these places. Is jiu-jitsu one of the, I mean, obviously is one of the places. Do you have some other groups where you guys have some different initiation rituals, and can you share any of those with us?
Well, I run a group called the Order of Fire, which is kind of my pet project, where it's kind of a philosophy that I developed called Solar Idealism, and we do a ritual, and that's basically our initiation. But it's not, I wouldn't call it an initiation ritual, because it's an initiation for us because that's what our whole idea is based on, is this idea of the fire. But for real initiation to take place, you need a role transition. Like, who do you know, who will you become? Like, there's all these groups that say that men need to be initiated, right? It's kind of a new agey thing that is out there around. There's a lot of guys that say men need initiation. And that was a big part of like the mythopoetic men's movement and so forth in like the 90s. But the problem with our society is that we don't have an idea. We don't have a coherent single version of what a responsibility of a man is. You know, we don't, here's what a man is, here's what a man does, here's how a man behaves. And you know, in a small society, you would have that. And so when you got initiated into manhood, the expectations were very clear about what that means. But because of the way our society is structured right now, and there's so many different groups and so many competing ideals, that really has to happen at a smaller level. You know, like initiate into a group, like what are the expectations of you in this group? Or is a little bit more functional than just like, there's so many guys out there trying to like, we're going to initiate you as men. Well, what does that even mean? Like, what are your responsibilities after you get initiated? Who do you supposed to become? And the society as a whole isn't going to force you to be that. You know, like you can do whatever, kind of do whatever you want. So you need a smaller group, I think, of guys to do that.
I would highly agree with that. You know, I think back to, you know, just going through Parris Island and Marine Corps boot camp, right? And I was fortunate enough to be a little bit older when I went in and graduated as the guide and the honor grad and all that fun stuff. And I got to tell you, you know, I got to sit down with the colonel and the sergeant major of the base for a dinner and talk to them about what I thought of Marine Corps boot camp training, right? Like the initiation of becoming a Marine. And I didn't have a glowing review for him. I was kind of like that guy. I was like, this is pretty easy. I mean, I can't believe how many guys, any of these shitbags you guys are letting through become Marines. And, it kind of, did something to me where I was like, man, there's got to be more than this out there. Right. And so to push further and to find what it was, and I got over to force reconnaissance in the Marine Corps. And it wasn't just getting through, the initial shock training that's there, and then going through your indoctrination stage, and then your class phases. It was really more about finding that small group, that team, right, and then showing up and performing with that team, where these guys had already built reputations within that community. They've already had the experience. And then those guys are the guys that can vouch for you. And I think that's, one of the sides of initiation that I think a lot of people miss is I think you get it right. Like it does need to be a small group, but it's also got to be this almost hierarchical group that has, a reach into local communities, or within the communities at a broader length anyway. And so those parts of your book I thought were, really something that guys need to pay attention to, especially if they're going to be starting, groups like this.
Yeah. I mean, I will say that, I even though you didn't have a glowing review, as far as authentic initiations in modern society, some of the military branches are like the only ones that really left. Like that is actually, compared to what regular guys get, that these guys, there's 60-year-old guys driving around with the bumper stickers says once a Marine, always Marine. Like they got an identity, like they had an identity switch, I mean, and then obviously there are like tiers of that. Like I have a buddy in my group who's was a Marine Raider, and like so he has that tier of identity, and there's like known some Green Berets, and they have their whole thing, and they handle shit differently than other guys handle it. Different navalists, they make fun of Navy SEALs, and like there's all these different groups within those communities.
And confirm.
Yeah.
Randy.
There's
Fuck you, Randy.
And this is where the time I dip out, because like then that's when you guys all start talking in acronyms, and I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about anymore. but yeah, no, it's there are very few initiations. And the other thing, since we were talking jiu-jitsu, obviously I saw this, a lot of people were really against that whole, the gauntlet, when people get their belts and they get like slapped with belts, which that is actually a real initiation like that. I mean, it's, and pretty milquetoast really. I mean, it's not, it's not that you're just going to slap with a belt. Nothing bad's going to happen. But people complain about like, it's too barbaric. It's like, man, that's like one of the only things left. That's actually okay. It's again skill based. You've proved that you belong there. You've gotten the whole thing. It's merit based, and then you get kind of hazed for 10 seconds, and it's good.
It's literally the easiest thing you're going to do in jiu-jitsu is get hit with a belt, for God's sake.
Right. Yeah. The idea people complain about it. I mean, like I can take it or leave it. I don't really care, but I mean, I appreciate it. I mean, I've had it the first time when I got my blue belt, I got like, shark tanked in. And then when I got my purple belt, I did the gauntlet. And I mean, it's like, that's not hard. And it's kind of cool that it exists. We have so few things like this. What's kind of cool, and I've met people who have done this, is that there's still academic fencing groups in Germany who do the Schmiss, like where you actually get a cut across your face with a fencing, like,
Oh,
like that's where like all the old movie villains had their like scar across their eye. That was probably what it's from. And so I've met guys who from these groups in Germany that still exist, like we're young guys, where they'll get in these academic fencing fraternities, and they'll get the Smiths. Like basically the idea is that you're not supposed to flinch at all, and you just
interesting.
and then someone like stitches you up, but I just when when I met those guys and they they had the scars and they made little jokes like sometimes we sew a button on, like yeah, like they made these little jokes. I'm like, man, that is so cool that still happens, you know.
Oh,
Well, and again, in my opinion, anybody that says I'm getting to the point now where if anybody says anything is barbaric, it's just a first world problem conversation at that point, because there's just so many different things across like all different walks of life and in industries and careers and philosophies and academia and whatever. That's something that was useful 1,000 years ago is still going to be useful today. Like, give me a break. Like, especially the masculine expression of force. It might not be the first choice, but it better be the last. Otherwise, you're not going to have a choice at all.
Mm-hmm.
If something lasted 1,000 years and it's still useful, then it's proven itself to be useful for a reason. And maybe we've forgotten what that is, but like, I feel like we tend to think of technology as like computers and electronics, but like some of these things that the ancients figured out, like that was technology, whether it's spirituality or going through some kind of gauntlet or ritual, like that was a technology to like sort the strong from the weak and to move.
Or Socratic method could be used could be referred to as a technology.
Well, and
It's a
not
way of
only
thinking.
and not only the formal gauntlets that are, like that one in fencing where they're going to chop someone's face and you better not flinch, which I think is pretty amazing. But also some of the, I guess, naturally occurring experiences that are really being subdued and in many ways eliminated from our society, especially here in the first world. Things like bullying. Okay.
Yeah.
I think that bullying, and I don't know if we're going to get kicked off whatever platforms we're on, but there's a place for that in society, that it can actually be a contributing factor in the development of someone's strength. Because if you're not tested, if you don't have an adversary, then there isn't as much of an incentive to become strong. And so when we remove that opposition, when we remove that threat from people's lives, of course they're going to be soft because they don't have to be strong. What are some ways that we can, I guess, not like beat the crap out of everybody that we see that's younger than us, but what are some ways that you have seen that we can counter that as a society to, not really necessarily like, shove our kid into a closet with somebody that's like 40 pounds heavier that's going to beat the crap out of them every day. But what are some ways that you've seen that we can make a shift in our culture that can sort of counteract that the absence of that?
Well, there are a lot of factors with that because obviously where kids deal with their peers the most is at school, unless they're homeschooled, and then that's a whole different subject. But like,
we beat
kids...
them up just the same. Just
okay, well, there you go.
Make fun of them, push them into walls, and yeah, absolutely.
You're like, I basically just haze my children. But it's no, I mean, like I have a buddy who is actually a sniper, and he had an issue where someone was getting bullied, and he wanted to have a talk with some of the kids, and he got in a lot of trouble. He got in a lot of trouble with the school. So, and that was one of the things that really came. So much of this is administrative.
Yeah.
In terms of like, okay, it's fine to say like, you want to tell like your kid that they're supposed to punch somebody back, like, okay, you defend yourself, like that's what you're supposed to do. But, that the consequences from that in like a lot of places are very bad, and they have nothing to do with getting punched. Like they have everything to do with like, oh, now you're kicked out of school, or now like, there's a lawsuit or something like that. We have a lot of administrative problems, I think, that people have to deal with, which are challenges. That's where a lot of the real challenges are in developing masculinity, again, in America, is that you have these systems that are run pretty much by women. Like the educational system is pretty much run by women. And then they push their own morality on it and their own way of dealing with things. And those kids probably need to, punch each other a little bit, but then, you're also dealing with like people who are bringing knives to school and all this other stuff that like are like, no, like, no, people need to get some dirt pushed in their face and like, have some problems. I mean, I certainly ran my mouth and got beat up once or twice in like junior high school. And did some beating up a little bit too, but I mean, that's a part of the experience. That's a part of, you have to have that growing up, or you can't negotiate conflict very well, and you really become, when you become kind of just feminized, and that's why you have all these people who, in the way that women can yell at men and call them names and know that they're not going to get hit. There's a lot of men who grow up assuming that that's the expectation as well. And they conduct themselves like women.
Yeah.
They've never
been punched in the face and you can tell.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And a lot of people should, like they needed it. Like they needed a little bit of a check. Like that you have to assess that situation. Like if that guy's X amount bigger than me, maybe I'm gonna lower my tone. You have to do that math, and if you haven't had to do that math, you're not functioning on the same level as guys who have.
I think we're at a point in society where more men and more people need to get punched in the face than have needed it.
Yeah,
I used to talk a lot of smack. I know this is going to surprise a lot of people here.
I'm shocked.
I used to talk a lot of smack when I was a kid.
Used to.
And then and then I got punched in the face a few times, and I realized, like, okay, there's certain times and places where maybe you shouldn't, or certain people that maybe you should feel it out a little bit more before you see how funny you think you are. And like, I'm a better person for having like been punched in the face a few times. Like I can vividly remember like 3 times off the top of my head where somebody just punched me in the face, and I was like, oh, all right, I might have crossed the line here.
You watch the fist meet your forehead.
Yeah, no, it was more I felt it before I even saw it, usually.
I'm shocked that you used to like run your mouth and get hit.
Yeah, I still do, but I'm just more tactical about it.
Yeah.
Hey, Jack, can I ask you another question?
Sure.
In Becoming a Barbarian, I read something that stood out to me that I wanted to dig into a little bit, and it was the there seems to be this popular notion these days with men and with just people in general that there's a responsibility that must be assumed to fix everything in the world, right? Like we have to care about everything. Like it's our responsibility to put a Ukrainian flag in front of our house because we have to solve that problem because we're a part of this global community, and we have to carry the burden of everything on our shoulders. Whereas it's really just not realistic, and it's an illusion for us to presume that we could do something like that. And the notion that I got from that section of the book was really it's focusing on, okay, what we're in, okay, the tribe that we are a part of, the community that we do exist in. People are gonna watch this and listen to it, and I think a lot of people are still in that mind frame of we need to care about fixing everything in the entire world, and it's our responsibility and it's our burden when it's not. What message could we share with people that are under that illusion that we could kind of bring them back around to reality?
Well, it's a question of focus, because there are problems all around you, and there are problems everywhere in the world, and someone is selecting where you're focusing for you. I mean, terrible things happened somewhere in Africa today, and you didn't hear about it. I feel like that. I'm comfortable saying that's true. So something vile and terrible, like an inhumane and horrible happened somewhere in Africa today, but you don't care about it because the media didn't tell you to care about it today. But what they want you to care about, they're directing your attention in a particular direction. Because you couldn't actually care about, you couldn't even know, like your brain couldn't even know all the terrible things that happened in the world today. Yeah, like billions and billions of people. Terrible, like people are getting raped and like just their heads chopped off. All kinds of things are happening in the world right now. And we didn't hear about it because the news didn't tell us to focus on that thing. So someone is always directing your focus to focus on this other thing. And it's really not how humans have ever lived. I mean, most people, I couldn't tell you the exact statistic, but I mean, how many people walked more than 50 miles from their house their entire lives, for most of human history? Like from where they live, they didn't go very far. They didn't know about what was happening, in some faraway place. Like if you lived in ancient Greece, you probably didn't know what was going on in like ancient Iran or like India or whatever. You had no idea what was going on. Like you're just, know what happened down the street. And that's how humans are organized. And that's how we're supposed to think. We can only, like there's Dunbar's number that says we can only really process like 120 people. And maybe that's true. Maybe there's more, to that. But the amount of people you can really care about is finite. So when you're wasting all that energy caring about all these people that are strangers, it's like, I think ask the question, like, why do they want you to care about that particular stranger? And yes, that's terrible. But also there's so much performance that's involved in that too. Like people are like, oh, I just feel terrible about this thing. And it's like, there's some people who actually get wrapped up in it and can't sleep at night because of X global situation. But then there's other people who just, like you said, they put their little flag in their yard or their thing on their profile, their flag on their profile, and they say what you're supposed to say. And to me, it all strikes me as, I'm sure you guys have all seen American Psycho, like that scene where he's at dinner and he's like talking about apartheid. And it's just all fake and fake and gay, and it's like he just goes on about apartheid and then equal rights for women, and he just lists all the things that he's supposed to care about because he's a psychopath, and that's how it reads to me so often when I see this. Like, oh really? Do you care about this thing that you wouldn't have known about unless they, I mean, yeah, it might be horrible. I mean, I try not to pay attention. Like, obviously, there's all kinds of stuff going on in the Middle East right now, and I just kind of tune it out because it's like, it's not gonna be my business, really. That's not close to me, and it's at a place I'm probably never going to go to. And yes, it might be terrible, but it's not where my head needs to be.
Yeah,
on a daily basis. Yeah.
Don't travel to the Middle East. 1 star. That's
would not recommend.
Especially the places where it's terrible. For God's sake,
do not recommend.
Well, it also,
yeah. I mean, it makes me mad because there are places. Man, I really like ziggurats. I would really like to go to Iraq, and I just don't feel like it's a good travel destination. There's just so much cool stuff in the world to see in that region, unfortunately. But I wish they'd get their shit together, but that doesn't seem to be anything that's going to happen.
And Jack, correct me if I'm wrong, but signaling support for something like the Ukraine conflict or what's going on with Israel or whatever, signaling that like support for that kind of thing when you have zero basis of like actually touching the initiatives to provide support or actually do work seems like a patently feminized thing. Like you're trying to signal to the rest of your community, like, hey, I'm on your side, protect me in case anything happens, kind of thing. Like because my girlfriend and I, we've talked about a lot of this stuff. We've talked about your book, and she might not realize it, but we have. And like one of the things that I find very interesting is that like there's a survival evolutionary mechanism for like women need their circle of girlfriends to gossip and everything so they can understand what's happening in the community around them as a form of like security establishment and maintenance, right? Versus like the men are going out with other men to not only do the hunting, but also establish the kind of like perimeter and everything else because they're maintaining security outside of the domicile and outside of the community on the fringes of the community. I don't know. It's just like, that's just what it seems like for like the whole, like, oh, I've got the Ukrainian flag on my profile. I'm a good person. It's like, it seems patently feminine to me.
Yeah. What are we supposed to say now? Like, you want a cookie? Information. How am I a good person? Like, how am I being a good person today? Mm-hmm. And that's what's really insidious about the way, we have like the media controlling what morality is, oh, this is what you're supposed to care about today. This is what and so if you signal that, then you're a good person. And we
get your money at the same time.
For sure.
What
what's frustrating to me about like the whole feminist movement is to me at least, like my perception of it is like, well, we could run things so much better instead of realizing like you can't run it better and we can't run it better, but together we might be able to get pretty damn close to running it really well if we understand that like we are like a yin and a yang to this thing, that like you have your role, we have our role, and if we do that and kind of bring it together, like kind of Mike was saying, like there is some, I think that there's some usefulness to the like how like the women want to gossip and know what's going on, and that might even be useful to you. Be like, oh, you heard what? All right, 9 times out of 10, it's probably going to be something you don't give two shits about. But every once in a while, I'll be like, I'm going to store that in the memory bank. That might be useful because that might be useful for what you're doing. You know, when as you protect the perimeter, and they're inside, and you got to kind of know what's going on inside too to keep tabs on. This guy. Oh, this guy's doing what? Oh, fuck that guy. Like I got to keep an eye on him. I thought I could trust that guy. So there's usefulness to it. Like I don't think that like men can just do everything on our own either. There's utility to the feminine side. Just the thing that just gets me with the whole feminist movement is we could just do everything. Like try it. Let me know how that works out for you.
Yeah, it's blown out of proportion.
Yeah.
Like if you have what they're really doing is do you want me to stop?
No, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. They're talking in the background. So but everything that they're doing is the way that they bring people together. Is the way they create relationships within communities. That's why women are kind of better in corporate environments and stuff like that. Like, let's have the potluck. Let's get it. Men, like, if you give us a task, they want to go do it. But if it's like, men probably wouldn't organize any potlucks. Like they wouldn't organize any like social event, like little mixers, all these little things that women do. They want to do those things because they're building social cohesion within a group. And they're also when they're kind of in the right role, they're doing like family scrapbooking and all they keep the memories of all the things, and they keep the memory of the team. Really, they do all that stuff together, and that's all the productive things that they're doing that build social cohesion that men don't want to do. You know, like men. I always joke, who sends out Christmas cards? You know, like men don't care about that. You know, but that's building social relationships, and that's what. Yeah, it is it's good that women do that. You know, like it's just. When the whole society becomes let's do everything that women do is what we run into a problem, and that's kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah, I was gonna say, which is precisely where we're at.
This is the time of year that I reach out to the dudes that I think that are really good friends that I only talk to one time a year to make sure I still have their address correct, so my wife can send out a card. And I double check, and I'm like, "Hey, how's everything going? Good with you? Yeah, okay, cool. We'll talk next year.
Enjoy my
See you
card
later, ape."
Oh, speaking of apes, no, I'm just kidding. We've got some sponsors. Let's roll those guys real quick. We'll be right back. A big shout out to our friends over at Punchplate, Coddle.co. That's CODL.co. Punch plates are a durable medium for your Bitcoin and can store 12 words or 24-word Bitcoin backups. Storing your Bitcoin in metal ensures your keys will survive in the elements, accidental spills, and in some cases even fire. You don't have to worry about smeared ink or ripped paper and can sleep soundly knowing your Bitcoin are inscribed on a punch plate. These are the best prices you're going to find in this industry. $24 for a 24-word punch plate. It's simple. It's a punch and a plate. No little letters, no stamps with letters on them, just a punch and a plate. Go check them out at coddle.co. That's punch plate at coddle.co. Solo Satoshi is dedicated to the advancement of open source Bitcoin mining with a steadfast commitment to the security and decentralization of the Bitcoin network. As a pioneering force in the Bitcoin space, your mission is to empower individuals and businesses worldwide with innovative, secure, and decentralized mining solutions. At Solo Satoshi, they believe in the transformative power of open source software and the potential it holds for the future of Bitcoin mining. They strive to foster a community of developers and enthusiasts who share our vision of a more secure and decentralized Bitcoin landscape. Our dedication to open source principles is at the heart of their mission, driving their commitment to transparency, collaboration, and innovation. They are passionate about supporting the growth and the development of the Bitcoin network, and they recognize the critical role that open source software and developers play in achieving this goal. By promoting and contributing to open source ecosystems, they aim to facilitate a more robust and resilient Bitcoin network, ensuring its longevity and success for years to come. At Solar Satoshi, their mission is not only to provide cutting-edge mining solutions, but also to educate and inspire others about the importance of decentralization and open source principles in the Bitcoin space. They believe that by working together, we can create a future where Bitcoin mining is more accessible, efficient, and aligned with the core values of decentralization and open collaboration. All right. Thanks to all our sponsors. We really appreciate you guys. If you'd like to become a sponsor of the show, you can hit us up at bitcoinveterans.org, and we will take a look and see if it's compatible. We're all about freedom tech here, and got to guarantee if you're in the Bitcoin space and you want to become a sponsor, we've probably got a space for you. So anyway, if you're just joining us, Jack Donovan, author of The Way of Men, is with us tonight, and I'll tell you what, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I know we're getting up on a special time here. We got a few more minutes before that, but yeah, this idea of feminizing the masculine class, boy, I think, when we look at, the causation of this, and, not just the Bolsheviks and communism and all that kind of bullshit, but when we look at this, it kind of, like, for me, I look at how fast technology around the turn of the century in the 1900s happened. And with it, we changed, and this is an outside, this is not the norm of society. We got into the industrial age, and then all of a sudden you had these, cities and, suburbs starting to pop up, and, technology really changed, and they really had no way to navigate it. But then you had guys like FDR, and Wilson really changed the game. That's why we talk about money a lot, and this meritocracy concept instead of a communist socialist utopia that doesn't make any sense. That's I think what spurred a lot of this is, you had technology, and we got to be careful, obviously, because technology is outpacing even what it ever has at this point. And so if we look at history and we go, hey, like, technology really screwed the human population, because there was this influx of communism and socialism around the world during these times where, now we're facing first world problems versus third world problems. We're not slugging it out in the fields in the muck and the mire anymore. We've got these cushy lives where maybe guys don't even have calluses. I think we're, moving into that period again, kind of, with some ability to look back and say, hey, maybe we shouldn't be as comfortable as we made ourselves during, maybe the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And what are we going to do about that, Jack?
Well, yeah, I think it's Nissan Taleb or whatever has one of his quotes is the opposite of masculinity is technology. Or, yeah, like, I don't know that that's quite true, because actually it's men who create technology far and in a way, starting with like arrows, but it is tricky, like there's a lot of things. I mean, obviously now the thing is AI, and I'm old enough to remember dial-up modems for the internet. So and I remember how the internet was only supposed to be good. Nothing could ever go wrong. It was, look at how amazing this is going to be for humanity. And we're seeing that kind of talk right now with AI as well. Like, no, it's going to be amazing. And all of us are like, we've all seen the movies. Like, this seems like a bad idea, but it's happening anyway.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like in the way that the internet just kind of happened, and then we're all going to, shake out, and we're going to deal with it. The same thing is going to happen with AI. We just need to know how to use it now, because it's not going away. Yeah. So, I mean, it's one of those things, like, it's going to become part of the world. And so you're going to have to either learn to use it, you're going to be like one of those boomers who couldn't use the internet. Like it's going to be the same process. But obviously then that in the same way that does things to our minds that maybe the Industrial Revolution did to our bodies in terms of having to think through things. Like in the way that when you can have ChatGPT look it up really quick. There's all kinds of things that you can do now that, it'll be a crutch for a lot of people, and a lot of people will actually get dumber in the way that men got weaker. And, so that's going to be something that is going to be a challenge moving forward in the future is how to maintain. Maybe we can learn some of the lessons from the past as far as like, well, what do you want to keep? In the way that you still maybe don't need to have calluses on your hands, but it's probably better if you're doing things that cause them. Like that's something that men maybe need to do as monkeys, and we need to have that part, something in that, because it makes us better. It makes us self-realized. And the same thing, we're gonna have to look at technology and what parts of thinking do we want to do, and also socializing. Socializing is also a major thing, and I notice it myself because I work at home. I don't have to talk to anyone ever, except for like these things. I go to the grocery store, I go to jiu-jitsu. That's the only place I actually have any social interaction, and millions of people are being encouraged to live that way. And their social skills, I've noticed it myself. Your actual social skills in like social situations, they're perishable. Like, how do I start a conversation? How do I carry on a conversation? Like, I'm a whiz at Telegram, but like I'm hilarious. But like in real life, like what's happening? So I think there's a lot of challenges there as to thinking not only what we want to be as men, but as humans, and how much we want to maintain. And I think like making sure that we're actually going out and meeting up with other men and doing things in real life is very, very important to our the way we process information and the way that we can deal with each other.
I think learning how to treat these technologies as tools for self-improvement or to make yourself better, stronger, faster, whatever, is maybe the proper or appropriate way to be. Like, I don't think rejecting technology is the right answer per se, but obviously it can have some weaknesses. There's going to be some bad things that come along with it, because some people just try to use it to make their life easier. But if you are on this path of trying to improve yourself and be stronger and faster and smarter and everything, like, all these tools can be used to like get even better at all these things. It's just like, do you have the self-discipline to continue to do hard things while using the technology to make certain parts of your life easier or better so that you can do harder things?
Yeah. I mean, well, and it's like, it's a meritocracy in everything. And in terms of, there are people who are being like, I'm going to use this so that I can do more. I'm going to find out a way to use this so I can do it. And there are tons of people doing that, like running whole businesses off of ChatGPT and all kinds of things like that. I can do more constantly because it's freeing up more time. And I'm using it for certain things like, it's amazing how many questions you can ask it and get the answer that you would have Googled before, but you've gone to like 30 different pages before you figure it out.
Right.
But then sometimes it's wrong. Today it told me we were in June. When I asked it what time zone to make sure I was on the time zone for this show, I'm like, okay, I'm in Arizona. What time is it on the East Coast? I just don't want to fuck this up. And it's like, well, because it's in June and you're in Arizona. I'm like, wait, what? That's the really scary thing, is that it lies and is confused sometimes. But
I've been trying to use Grok to improve. I see myself as somewhat of a meme lord, and I've been trying to use Grok to improve my meme lord game. And I
Right.
type in all these like descriptors and try to, like, in my mind, I've got this perfect like meme ready to go, and I try to use all these descriptors to get it to build. And I'm like, that was not even close to what I said. You I'll just screw it. I'll just do it myself.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, we are in a weird era, right? Like where almost 3 years ago, this was not real. Like 3 or 4 years ago, none of this was real. And the other day, I'm using ChatGPT to design a workout right now, and I have a fair amount of experience in working out, so I know what's wrong and right and whatever. But I'll be like on my way to the gym, I'll pull up the back workout that we talked about the other day, and it gave me some bullshit. And I was like, that wasn't what we talked about at all. And I'm like having this argument with like, that is not what we discussed.
You ChatGPT.
like that is you're just making things up now. That was not what we discussed at all. It's just weird that you're arguing with computers now, and it feels very.
Does anyone else say please and thank you just in case the AI decides to start attacking? I'm like, look, we're cool, right?
Yeah.
I treated you with respect, bro. Why are you trying to?
Hey man, I don't want my Jarvis turning into Ultron. All right,
Yeah, it will.
I've seen that movie.
Yeah, but when it kills you, it'll be very polite about it. So
as long as it does it quick,
that's all that matters.
Yeah, it's all gonna be drones.
That's right.
Yeah.
You guys hear that?
Oh boy.
Oh snap!
What's that?
Oh, there's our early Ernie.
What have we got here? A fucking comedian, private joker.
All right, Jack, it is story time. If you're new to the show, this is where we put our guests on the spot and we have them tell us a story. It can be entertaining, it can be hysterical, it can be disgusting, like Booth, man. I'll tell you what, some of the stuff that we've heard on this show, and it does. I mean, we have war stories, we have guys on missions, shooting at their air support, getting shoot about by their SEAL commander like Jocko. Like it is across the board. If you've got a good story within, I don't know, maybe a good jiu-jitsu story or something like that, but we'd love to hear it.
Man, like a whole narrative.
Tell you what, these briefs, man, it's not just Randy who sends them out, and people don't actually read them. It's also mine. So, basically what we do is we just have a short, pithy type of story where people do some self-deprecation sometimes and all that kind of stuff. Where maybe something went wrong in training, or they were on some mission or whatever. It can really be anything. It's somewhat humorous.
A lot of times it's funny. It's funny party time stories. Yeah.
Maybe a little embarrassing at the time, but you look back on it and you're like, that's pretty funny.
Yeah. What do you call it? Type 2 fun or whatever, like that kind of stuff. But I don't know. Since we'll say I'll do my stupid jiu-jitsu competition story.
Okay.
It's not that exciting. I'm sure I have something funnier and more retarded that's happened to me in my lifetime, but I can't think of anything off the top of my head. But now the only time I've ever competed in jiu-jitsu, I look a little younger than I am. So like I go out there and I'm like, oh my God, this is like someone's orthodontist that I'm gonna fucking fight. And he was like younger than me, but he had like whole full head of gray hair and whatever. And we go out there and I just we're doing this. I was a blue belt and I was just kind of mad about it, but looking at later, but we did this stupid where you grab each other and just kind of throw each other around thing without any good takedowns or anything like that. And then finally he took me down. Well, no, I shot a single leg on him, but that was the point where they sucked. And cause that's my coach yelled at me and he got me in actually really good guillotine. But I started growling at him. Which I kind of do because I have to go Super Saiyan because I'm a pretty strong guy, and so I'm like at that point I'm like about ready to go out, but like anyway I ended up breaking out of it, and he started hitting on his chest, and I'm like, oh my God, is this guy gonna have a heart attack right here? I mean, I know he looks old, but like he faked an injury. It was weird. He couldn't tell the people where it was, but he kept going. I don't know. It's because I growled at him or what. But And eventually, yeah, the medic came over. Like I seriously thought, I'm like, is this guy gonna get the paddles or what? But then finally he just got up and like,
What?
and then left. And so that I got like this gold medal that day for this minute and a half round of this guy, just like faking an injury just so he wouldn't have to do any more of it. And what's weird is that he had like 7 wins. Like it was my first time, and he had a decent record. I didn't look at it until after, but I was like, wow. So
Was the guillotine his
like,
only move?
I mean, maybe. I mean, it was good. It was a solid guillotine. Like he did a really good one. But I don't know. Maybe it was just maybe
It was the
he
growl.
like, I'm not dealing with this guy. I don't know.
Growl and getting out of his masterful guillotine. He's like,
No.
I can't.
I've got nothing left. Well, he probably put a whole bunch of juice into keeping that, and like, but still, I mean, that's really like really.
Maybe, maybe it crossed his mind like, hey, I actually got to go fix teeth on Monday. If you wasn't honest, right? Like, yeah. So some of those competitions, like the IBJJF stuff, man, that is that's a little more serious. And you get somebody that looks like you in there that's growling at people. We just went from like weekend warrior to, oh shit, this guy's actually here to fucking kill me.
Yeah. Well, and that's a scary thing about those things too, though. I mean, on the more self-deprecating side, I'm very wary of, I'm 50. I'm in an age category. I feel like I've earned being creepy strong and in good shape for being 50. I've put in the work. I deserve that. I don't want to go and roll with in competition. I don't want to roll with like a 23-year-old.
Fuck no.
No.
And so it's actually hard at like purple belt in my weight class, like cruiserweight, purple belt. Last time I wanted to compete, I couldn't get a match. The only other person at my weight class at my belt level was 23. And I'm like, that's not cool. I think that's not cool. Well, because I mean, like, I feel like older guys like know what the deal is, but like if you're 23, that's like full on like fucking go, like, and
there's the
I would
old
like to
man
keep my
retard
knees
strength, and then there's the young man like ignorant of the world and repercussion strength.
Invincible.
Yeah. Like I got a $9,000 deductible on my health insurance, and that knee goes, that's going to be a bad scene. Not looking for that to happen. Like I don't need somebody like ripping a knee bar or something like that. I'll be like a heel hook or something. So I mean, and that's what a lot of the younger guys do now. Like they're into that game, and I'm like, no, we're not doing that. So I would like to walk. So yeah, that's anyway.
I would like to walk.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, it's just like it's I mean, like I only got so many good years
like
left.
walking.
Yeah.
Yeah, old man jiu-jitsu is a real thing, man. You're exactly right. You're like, yeah, young guys, white belts, all that fun stuff. Like, fuck that, man. I'm good. You can go spaz out with somebody else over there. That's fine by me.
I mean, I love that like an open mat, but like when people were like freaking out, they're in competition and they're like trying to like prove they have something to prove.
Yep.
That's a little bit of a different vibe. Like I do that all the time. I think it's fucking cool to be like an old guy and roll with 21-year-olds and like whatever who are doing crazy wrestling shit and all over the place at once. Like I love that. Like it makes me feel really like I'm doing well. But yeah, you don't want, in competition. I need some kid ripping my ankle apart or something like that. Like that's not okay. Yeah, I mean it's true. Old man strength and retard strength are basically the same thing.
They're very similar. And it was really bad is when you get a old retard that rolls. So.
Ooh, yikes.
Oh, let's throw it around, guys. Jack, I can't tell you enough how much we appreciate you being here. Gabe, Mike, parting thoughts on this?
Yeah, I just want to thank you for making the time to be here. Thank you for your contributions. Thank you for the work that you're putting into articulating the things that we're talking about. Obviously, we've made it pretty clear that it's been very influential for us and for our larger group, and I appreciate what you're doing.
One thing I would say to sign out would be The Way of Men is a book that's obviously popular with men. Clearly, because of all of us talking about it, but I think it would be really important, especially right now, for a lot of us and the guys in our community, and also just like single women. I think we need to get more women to read it to understand a little bit. There's been a lot of focus for the last, I mean, I'm a millennial, I'm in my 30s. So like my entire life, the focus has been understanding women, and there has been zero attempt to understand men, or at least it's been so focused on women for so long that we've forgotten men essentially. Mm-hmm. I think we would do a lot of good to understand a lot of the things we were talking about. Especially, I wanted to lean in more, but we didn't have the time for it. But one thing you were talking about earlier, Jack, was like the kind of like the gradient of masculinity, and like you don't want to be full masculine, because if you go full masculine, you're unruly and you don't listen to anyone else's rules or society's rules, and you end up in the clink like you're talking about. So like I think it's important for families and parents to understand like the kind of like who they want their young men to be and who they want their young women to be with. I think that'll be very important for like the nuclear structure of the family, particularly in the US going forward for the next couple of decades.
Yeah, one of the coolest things, I don't have many female readers, but I do every once in a while I do get a woman who's like, oh, my boyfriend made me read this. Now I understand him better, which is cool. And then really cool is that occasionally I'll get a single mother who's just trying to figure out what she's supposed to do. Mm-hmm. Like a single mother who's raising a boy. Okay. And like they read that and and I'm like, that's really cool. And kudos to her for like actually trying. So that's really, I think, and some of them have said that it was very helpful. It
shows that she's going a lot farther than the entire female population, in my opinion.
Yeah.
For real. Yeah. And I appreciate that.
I just wanted to touch on something. I had this written down like days ago as I was kind of taking some notes, and I'd be remiss if I didn't ask. At one point you talk about masculinity being like, is it a feature or is it a bug in case things, go sideways? And we talk about that a lot in this community of, just being prepared for, we live in a very fragile society and things could go sideways very quickly. So that whole concept of like, is masculinity a feature or a bug in case we need to tap back into this thing to rebuild everything? And I know we're getting into the end of that, and that's kind of maybe a lot to unpack, but could you talk a little bit about that?
No, it's definitely a feature. Feminists say it's a bug, but we say it's a feature. And it's because, it's the foundational thing. There's this great quote from Enter the Dragon, where Han says like, look at all the fragile things that would never survive if it weren't for strength. And to create a society, like I said, you have to have a perimeter, and that the idea that we'll always be protected by somebody else, that's false. Like the idea that they want to convince us that everything's going to be taken care of and everything's going to be fine and they have everything handled, and it's very clear that they don't.
By who?
So
who's going to do it?
Yeah, so someone has to do it, and someone has to have those skills, and someone has to be able to do those things. For instance, I'm sure the people of Ukraine were being told the same thing. For whatever is going on there, that money laundering scheme or whatever they're doing, but like that there's war happening, that wasn't happening before.
Yep.
And so, like 10 years ago, they were probably telling them, oh, we don't need masculinity anymore in Ukraine. We don't need you to do anything. And look where they are now. So, and that can happen anywhere in the world. And, who knows? I always say, the best way to stay out of trouble is probably to move to somewhere where there isn't trouble. In terms of like, you can, I've met super tactical guys who lived in like the worst areas in the world. And I'm like, that's why you need that every day. If the restaurant has bulletproof glass, move. Yeah, that's a problem. But at the same time, we can't really be protected from everything. So we have to, that has to be kept alive. Otherwise, you're going to have guys who just have no skills, have no ability to deal with stress or that kind of problem. And then, you become ruled by people who do.
Bingo.
Imagine that.
Man, what a tremendous episode. Jack, where can people find all your books and how can they get in contact with you?
Well, my books are on Amazon, and that's the best place to buy them. My website is jack-donovan.com, and I have the best place to find me right now. I'm trying to. I didn't get on X until Elon bought it, so I'm like behind. Like I don't have as many followers as you'd think I would, but I'm only at like 12,000 or something like that. But I think that's the future, and I like free speech and things like that. So that's kind of where I'd like to see my growth happen. So that's I think it's Mr. _ Jack Donovan because I waited too long and like I didn't get the real Jack Donovan. But
Okay, real
anyway.
quick, don't wait too
Yes.
long and get on if you're into the freedom tech, get on to Noster and we'll talk more about that.
Yeah, you can just consider us a source for everything freedom tech over here at Bitcoin Veterans. If you need anything Bitcoin, Noster, mesh testing, you name it. We've got a group of guys over here that we'd love to plug you into and all that fun stuff. And Noster is definitely one of those places where the future of freedom tech is heading, especially for social platforms. Like
Also, if you're learning ham radio, we got some guys that won't shut up about it.
You can always mute those groups. But Jack, hey, it has been a pleasure and an honor, man. I'm really humbled to have you stop by and spend an hour and a half with us and then some. Thank you so much. We wish you all the best out there. We'd love to know when your next books are coming out. Maybe we can have you back on, talk about that kind of stuff. And just more power to you. We need a lot more men out there doing good things like this, setting the bar for other men and helping redefine and give us some real understanding of what direction we should be heading in as a species. So really appreciate that. Gabe, Mike, Jordan, always good to have you guys here. Really appreciate you guys making the time. Everybody out there in the audience, you guys are vast. Thank you guys for sharing the show and telling everybody about it. We had almost 1,000 people out there. I think we're too shy right now in the audience live. The Way of Men is Jack's first book. Start with that. It's a great primer for everything else that he's got. Incredible books and just great wisdom from a guy that's obviously living the same type of lifestyle. Here at Bitcoin Veterans, we do this every day on Spaces, 10 a.m. Eastern. You can check out Coleman and the guys over there. They do a fantastic job on Twitter Spaces. And then there's Bitcoin Alaska that's coming up in July. The Bitcoin Veterans are throwing. There is going to be a whale day where they actually go out and watch whales. There's going to be a great conference. They've got some amazing speakers that are coming in already, and more to be announced on the way. This is the middle of July. I think it's July 2nd through the 5th, if I'm not mistaken. Close anyway. And I should say close enough. You should be there longer than that anyway, take in the sights of Alaska. But for Bitcoin Veterans, we are out. We will see you guys in the new year, new time, 9 p.m. on the East Coast. We're going to start doing that. Give us a little bit more of Gabe and Jordan, who you guys love, in addition to Mike. So until next year, you guys have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. We will see you in the new year. Peace.